We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC, and it certainly was not a dull moment on the Gator campus this past weekend. Of course, a loaded official visitor all over Gainesville on campus this past weekend, just loaded. So that means that we got a loaded episode of Gators Breakdown here for you as well, going through all these big names. This was the weekend. This was the weekend we were all pinpointing to a lot of the big names, big targets that the Gators are focusing on for this class of 2025. We're on campus this week. And then, of course, also, hey, we get a commitment of a 2026 Jaelen Waters. Very good last name, of course. Cornerback from the 2026 class commits to the Gators on Saturday, so we'll get into his profile as well right here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. So hit that like button right here as you're watching this on YouTube, or subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform if you haven't done so yet. And hey, look, right here, mid-June, go ahead and get your Gators Breakdown merchandise right there, gatorsbreakdownmerch.com. New designs, You Beat Miami shirts, all those other designs. I'm actually wearing one on this episode right now, of course. Little pub for myself, of course, right here on Gators Breakdown. gatorsbreakdownmerch.com, all those cool designs, new designs right there on the website. And, of course, if you want to keep the conversation going, link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus, extra episodes, ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown right there, access to that Discord server where the conversation's going, and, of course, a lot of recruiting talk on that channel right now on the Discord. So link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. All right, guys, let's get to it. Of course, the third official visit weekend right here for the Gators, and this was the biggest of the three for the class of 2025. So many big names, highly ranked targets right here on campus for the Gators. And it might be a weekend we'll look back for the safety position for the Gators. First, get this news out of the way. Caleb Singleton from Fleming Island committed to Rutgers over the weekend, if you didn't miss that. So before we get into who was on campus for Florida at this position, well, it might be getting a little clearer because of Caleb Singleton and his commitment. The versatile defensive back seemed to be highly regarded from Will Harris and the Gators staff, but the Gators just might have some higher targets on the board, with some pretty good chances for those higher targets on the board. And, of course, many were on campus this past weekend for that spot. So let's start right up here in the road in Jacksonville. Hilton Stubbs, and we all know the story there, was trending Florida. All of a sudden, the visit to USC happens, and he commits to USC. Well, we all know he likes Florida a lot. Even with that commitment to USC, and Florida knocked this visit out of the park to stay in striking distance of the Trojans. So whether Stubbs flips his commitment before the season or not, it's going to come down to what we know, what Florida shows on the field this fall. And Stubbs certainly reaffirmed that thought after the visit. I really do think this one is that simple. If Florida shows progress in the right areas, I predict Stubbs in this class. He said, quote, "It was great. I'm loving Florida. I'm loving everything about it. This OV was amazing. It was one of one. I loved everything about the visit," in the quote. So the main pull from this weekend for Stubbs was being able to connect with current players in the program. He has his visit to Miami next weekend. This may end up more of a battle between the Gators and the Canes in the end if he decommits for USC for any reason. If he was to flip somewhere else from USC, the Gators and the Canes might be that battle in the end. I like where Florida sits. He says it's not necessarily about wins, but progress the progress in the right areas. So I think if we see the progress in the right areas, it will equal some wins for Florida. So I think it will work itself out, but it's not just win-loss record he's looking for. So the Florida Gators made some big moves. We're going to stick here at safety and made some big moves for four-star safety Lagonza Hayward. Hailing from Toombs County, Georgia, Hayward recently completed his official visit in Gainesville. where he did disclose that Florida has a slight lead over South Carolina, with Georgia and Tennessee also in the mix. He stated that his commitment decision will be made public July 27th on his birthday. Still has Tennessee visit coming up this weekend. So maybe the biggest factor here is the chance to play early. He mentioned that. So 6'1", 205 pounds. He's considered one of the top safeties in the country. We haven't talked a whole lot about him because, he made a visit to Georgia in late May, and Georgia seemed to be trending at the moment when it was kind of thought going into visits that Tennessee may be the school to beat. Well, he goes to Georgia, and there's some good things coming out of that. He's at South Carolina last weekend. There was some kind of good word coming from that as well. And then, but out of this visit this weekend, comes out and says, you know what, it's Florida, South Carolina. It's not Georgia. It's hails from the state of Georgia. But then that Tennessee visit is coming up this weekend. So, behind the scenes, this one went really, really well for Florida. We'll see where it comes out in the end. Can you hold off the Tennessee visit? Are there some good feelings coming out of that one? But for right now, Florida likes where they sit on this one. So, one of the top safeties in the country on the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's a 95th overall player, so he's a top 100 player. He's a 10th ranked safety there. The On3 industry rankings placed him 112th, the overall player in the country, and 12th ranked safety. So the big time prospect here, Georgia native Bryce Thornton was his host, so to help press the right buttons along with Will Harris and Austin Armstrong. So big moves made at the safety spot this time for Hayward. And let's keep it going. One more safety that was on campus this weekend. Miami Columbus 4-star Bryce Fitzgerald made his second visit ever to campus and had plenty of eye-opening quotes. But one that stuck out was for DB coach Will Harris, saying, quote, "I don't trust many people, but I got faith in Coach Harris that he will get me to the next level." Pretty strong words there. Jason Marshall playing a role here as well, as Fitzgerald looks up to him, being from the same area down there in South Florida. So the Gators are at the top along with FSU and a visit to Miami next weekend. So we'll see if the Canes can kind of join up top, but it seems like a Florida State battle right now. And this is a player I've heard about for a few months that Florida's in good shape with, and I think this weekend further confirmed that. So he comes out of the visit, Florida State up top, visit to Miami coming up. Could be a big three battle in the state of Florida here for Fitzgerald. But so there you go. These three guys, you take three safeties in the class. There could be room there with Turner, Bridges, Douglas on the way out after this season. Gates moving the nickel. You got Jordan Castell there, of course. We just mentioned Bryce Thornton, so not a lot of depth there for the Gators once these transfers go out. So these guys can come in, the three I just talked about, and have plenty of playing time, plenty of opportunity. So at the very least, it'd be nice to get, of course, two. Sign me up for two for right now. If we could get two of Hayward, Stubbs, Fitzgerald in this mix, I'd be completely happy with that. But we'll Florida push for all three. Interesting, all three on campus at the same time this past weekend, but huge moves being made at the safety spot for the Gators this past weekend. So hopefully, did enough there to get a couple of those guys in here. All right, let's move to the other side of the ball because that's where we go for the headline player from the weekend and a top target at the wide receiver spot. And, of course, that is Vernell Brown III. And the visit doesn't really bring about anything new in his recruitment. Excuse me. He's still holding off for a decision in July with a FSU visit next weekend. If you're on social media, you've certainly seen the pics taken with him, his dad, and his grandfather out there, all their jersey numbers from all throughout the history of the Gators from that family. Billy Gonzalez showed him ways that the Gators can use him and not necessarily compare him to players like Percy Harvin, Kadarius Toney, and Trey Wilson, but comparing the similar play styles and usage and how they would use Brown and how they use those guys. So another big part that I know that has resonated are the players that are on the roster. And, that resonates with the parents as well, about how these current players talk about Billy Napier and the player experience under him. So Brown admits it would be cool to help Florida build it back, help build Florida back. Still looks like we have to wait for that July decision. He coming out of the interviews on Sunday basically saying, yeah, I'm going to take that visit to FSU. I'm going to reassess everything, take all these visits, then I'm going to make my decision in July. So I know that one's one we just kind of we feel good about it. Good, but got to let the process play through. Of course, I think I was happy to get out of that Ohio State visit a couple of weeks ago with no commitment. So yeah, that was the one that worried me the most, even though there was all the talk of him wanting to stay in state. I'll never count out Ohio State. Still not counting out Ohio State. So we'll see where it goes from there. But for one for Vernell Brown III, I think we have to like where Florida sits right now. So one of my personal tops from this class was on campus this weekend, and that's linebacker Jaelen Waters from Jessup, Georgia. FSU was in early on this recruitment, has been leading pretty much the entire time. Georgia making their move as well, but it was Florida's turn to get him on campus, and the Gators forced their way to the top, as Wallace now says the Gators are at the top with the Seminoles. His dad was in Gator heaven all weekend, as we know it. He's been shared that he is a huge Gator fan. And I know how that is. I mean, I grew up about 30 minutes from Jessup, right there where Wallace plays. So I know how it is being a Gator fan in Georgia. So believe me, you get ragged all the time with that. But being from that area, when you get to go to Gainesville, it feels a little different for you. So his dad was in Gator heaven all weekend. It was his birthday as well. So it was his birthday, Father's Day, and he's there get all in Gator heaven. Hopefully, that makes a difference. If this recruitment remains competitive with Florida and Florida State, you hope in some ways that this might serve as a tiebreaker for Florida. Get this in Florida's advantage. However, it's crucial to hope that, Florida State doesn't take a significant lead after Wallace has to visit, or not has to, but he's going to visit Tallahassee this coming weekend. As I said, that was a school that's kind of been in early, been trending this whole time until this past weekend. And if he's telling the truth, which I believe he is, now Florida has pulled even with FSU. Now you hope this visit doesn't pull it back into FSU's direction. His decision is expected on July the 2nd. So we know there's some Florida-Auburn battles that have been going on and are continuing to go on, and that's the theme of some of the commits that were on, or Auburn commits that were on Florida's campus this past weekend. Let's get the Auburn offensive line commit, Tavares Dice. 4-star admits Florida is one of his favorite schools after rating the visit 9 out of 10. The Gators are in good position if he was to decommit from Auburn. He was on his Auburn visit last weekend, and these are the only schools that are being considered right now, Auburn and Florida. And Dice admits he's not shutting this recruitment down until the fall, and this one's a real battle. So let's stay with the offensive line. The Gators are the leaders for 6'11", 330-pound offensive lineman Jaw Jackson. He's technically a 2024 prospect, so I know this has been a 2025 theme. We'll get into 26 in just a second, but we actually have to put it in reverse a little bit and go back to 2024 because that's what Jackson is. It's technically a 2024 prospect and a promising basketball player. Now he's going to switch to football. Originally from San Diego, he says Florida is his number one school right now, with plans to take official visits to FSU, Mississippi State, and Georgia. All those trips are expected to take place over the next week. He last played football in 8th grade before spending the past several years concentrating on hoops at IMG and the Overtime Elite. So he played that Overtime Elite. It's a semi-pro league for players 20 and under. So getting in an athletic, certainly a project that had not playing football in a few years now. Certainly, but that size, the old adage, you can't teach size, was 6'11", 330 pounds. I mean, yeah, that's not an instant playmaker, not playing football since the 8th grade. But certainly, Florida's got a lot of those projects the last couple of cycles along the offensive line. So not an instant contributor. And of course, you got to look at this one. If he's a 2024 recruit, not room on this roster, I think the plan is for him to be in Summer B wherever he goes. He had to be at Florida. He'd have to be a walk-on, preferred walk-on. One of those two designations. unless something else happens with the roster. But certainly something worth to keep an eye on, especially with him calling Florida his leader. Let's go back to another Auburn commit, and that's defensive lineman Malik Autry. He visited USC last week, and they felt good. Florida feels good with their visit this weekend, and Auburn doesn't seem worried about his good feelings of USC. And this is not the first good feeling about Florida. That's why I think Auburn feels pretty good about where they stand. But the Alabama product, he still has to visit Ohio State next weekend. Autry has been on campus a ton, almost 10 times, so the interest is clearly there. I'd put Florida behind the Tigers, right behind the Tigers. I think it's going to be tough to pull him away from Auburn, but hopefully all these visits pay off. Florida commit Jaelen Wiggins, he's working Autry for the flip, so certainly one of your top recruits in this class, getting in on the recruiting action. I believe he was on campus this past weekend as well, making his way. Of course, he's already had his official, but getting on campus and doing the work that your commits are not necessarily supposed to do, but what you want to see from them. And let's go now to 4-star wide receiver Donovan Olegbode, IMG product originally from Illinois, completed his third official visit overall, spending several days with the Gators. He appreciated meeting the team and the coaching staff, including head coach Billy Napier and receivers coach Billy Gonzalez. Olegbode does feel like a priority for the Gators at the receiver spot, and was told that the team or the staff was eager to develop him, help him reach professional goals. He's pretty straight to the point, keeps things close to the vest when he's talking about his recruitment. Jeray Hawkins, of course, his former teammate there at IMG, did tell him, look, you got to work hard to come here, and it's a high level of football at the receiver spot for Florida. Olegbode admits now this was a 7.5 to 8 out of 10 on a visit scale. It indicated that the Gators' track record of developing receivers and opportunity for early playing time make the Gators a strong contender. Olegbode has a history of keeping this recruitment close to the vest, so hard to get a feel for where he really is. I mean, I know that a 7.5 to 8 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 won't do much for many out there, but we'll see how much he's actually willing to give away in his recruitment. So Washington, USC, Florida already with visits. He has a Mizzou visit next week. Next up, UCF tight end Caden Peening from Ohio. But considering UCF, considering Florida, his dad has history in the state of Florida. Says the Gators have improved their standing with him, and the highlight is the coaching staff, especially Russ Callaway. 6'4", 230 pounds. He's among a few options for the Gators at tight end, of course. We've talked about that the last couple of weeks, so it may be a race for those spots at tight end. Also, let's go back to Ohio, and now Cedric Works, who's edge player, also considering Penn State and Kentucky with his visit for the Wildcats coming next weekend. The 4-star admits Florida definitely moved up his rankings. It was his first trip with a decision in late July or early August. My bad. I think it was his dad, I believe, who has a history in the state of Florida, not Peening, the tight end from Ohio who's committed to Central Florida. So a couple Ohio, state of Ohio prospects that were on campus this past weekend for the Gators. And then let's not forget the one commit that was on campus. Not all were targets for their official visit, and that was Waltez Clark, the running back, of course, who says he is, quote, locked in to the Gators, does not plan on any more official visits. And that had to be stressed. That had to be talked about because there's been a lot of talk in recent weeks of him visiting UCF for an official visit. That's not going to happen now. Montrell Johnson and other players have played their part here. Montrell Johnson basically giving him the spill on playing running back in this offense for Billy Napier. Jabbar Jaluk, of course, as well. But, nice to hear. There was a ton of talk if he was going to go visit UCF, take his official, and if they might stake their claim in this race for his commitment, but he shuts that one down. Florida is going to be, or no more official visits. Florida's going to be the only one right now. Well, I mean, I say right now, but if he's locked in, you hope no more down the road. And then not much out of Ty Jackson. Didn't talk, no interviews on this Sunday so far. We'll see if anything else comes out later in the week. He did spurn FSU to visit the Gators this week. Didn't give interviews, but the word is the visit went very well. So, all right, coming out here, 3 straight official visit weekends for the Gators and no commits. I know that's a storyline right now. Of course it is. You're always looking for these official visit weekends to produce commitments. Now, I think we all kind of knew this summer was going to be a little slower for Florida, but still surprising. Not one coming out of the official visit weekend. I think Vernell Brown III, I think Florida has certainly set themselves up in a great spot. Those safeties I mentioned earlier as well. Feel good about, probably 2 of those guys. At least getting 2 of those guys. We'll see what Florida's season holds and Stubbs, because that's going to be certainly a huge part of his recruitment down the road. Feel good about one or both, tight ends that visited the first weekend, and Tayshawn Gelsey, the wide receiver here out of Jacksonville, Micah Jones, the tight end out of Mississippi. Feel good about one or both of those guys down the road. Wide receiver Nashawn Montgomery. We saw all his predictions. I put him in a mock class right now. So those are guys who've been on campus, not necessarily committing right out of the visit, but guys I still see right now. If I were to make a mock class, I'd put them in there. So haven't committed right off their visits. Doesn't really matter as long as they're in the class, right? Now, we knew this was going to be a much slower summer, and these visits were going to be key for any headway. So certainly got to pay off. Some guys have dates set for decisions. Don't get me wrong. You'd like to see some of the surprises, coming right out of these visits. That can happen sometimes, Now, I know there's the famous silent commitments, then you hope those pay off down the road. We know how that turns out sometimes. Yeah, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But of course, some of those silents could be the surprises I'm talking about. I don't care as long as they end up in the class. Some guys, some you hear the storyline behind the scenes, some you don't. Unfortunately for the big names, I think Florida's in for. The staff isn't really in much of a position to really force anything as far as timelines go. I do think we'll get some decisions soon, but we know the season's going to have to pay off for some of them. I don't expect this class to catch on fire during the season and finish top 5 or anything like that, even with a season that maybe far exceeds expectations. But I do expect a good season to pay off for a few guys. So need to get a handful to commit soon. I think that will happen. And then a few that will hop on during the season and after the season. Yes, I am. I'll say it again. I am surprised none have hopped on board. Surprised there haven't been some surprise commits that maybe get caught up in it and commit on the following Sunday, not Monday. Hasn't happened yet. But I expect some of these visitors to pop soon anyway for the class of 2025. But let's go to where the commitments have happened. The class of 2026, on the other hand, has had a couple of high-profile additions the last couple of weeks. I mean, maybe pretty surprising to some. If you're struggling to get 25 kids, how can you get 26 kids? Well, it's happening. Saw a couple of weeks ago, Tampa quarterback Will Griffin popped a couple of weeks ago. And on Saturday, Jaelen Waters pledges to the Gators to give Florida 2 high-profile in-state commits for the 2026 class. And of course, I mean, you know, guys, when we got that commitment, and I'm happy. I got to get his jersey, right? We got the same last name. I mean, I'll be rocking it. I'll be rocking it there. But welcome to the class 2026. Way ahead of time. We know there's a lot of time here, but Jaelen Waters commits to the Gators. So it looks like the staff can still sell. They can still sell future to kids at the moment. So further strengthen their good start. As I mentioned, Will Griffin a couple of weeks ago, but the good start continues for the class of 2026 with the latest commitment, cornerback Jaelen Waters chooses Florida just weeks after withdrawing his commitment from rival Florida State, which he originally pledged to in late April. Given that Waters' father is a huge Gators fan, many believed that this move was inevitable, especially when he decommitted from Florida State. So Waters is a 4-star from Seffner Armwood, 6'2", 180 pounds. He's ranked as the 153rd overall player and 12th ranked cornerback in the class of 2026 by the On3 industry rankings. Meanwhile, 24/7 Sports Composite ranks him as the 192nd overall player and the 15th cornerback. In his sophomore season, Waters accumulated 20 tackles, 17 of those being solo, 6 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. As I mentioned, he joins 4-star Will Griffin in the class of 2026, making it 2 top in-state recruits for the Gators. So, of course, love getting the in-state kids and getting 2 high-profile, about top 150-ish overall players here for the Gators in the class of 2026. So let's pull up some highlights right here, and let me get those going. But you're gonna like what you see here. And there we go. Got him going, and thanks to YouTube right here for these. But from the get-go, you can see, I mean, just lines up right in the face of the receiver. Press man coverage, gets a pick right here. Lines up in the face of the receiver, uses his hands to stay in position, make a play. And he makes a play with the ball here instead of the receiver to make the interception. And can also just see he has the size you cover at cornerback. More highlights just show him lining up right on the receiver. He does a really good job of using his hands early in the route. His guys are not just creating any kind of separation whatsoever from him. He is in their hip. Physical play, makes some nice tackles on the wide receiver screen. That goes nowhere. That he makes the tackle. So short routes, deep routes, he is on the hip of the opposing receiver. Does a great job of with footwork to stay with the wide receivers. And the one play you'll love is the one you just saw here. And he gets picked on a screen. Wide receiver's off to the races, but Waters chases down the wide receiver, causes a strip fumble. Defense picks it up, and not giving up on a play. So love that right there. No matter what level you're at, of course, at this level, he's probably one of the better players on the field. But even when it didn't go his way, it gets picked, still doesn't give up on the play, ends up causing a turnover. Overall, just love when the wide receivers route. You can see the wide receiver uses a lot of footwork, trying to set up, trying to set up the matchup there. And he can match right with them. He doesn't get lost, doesn't take himself out of the play, as his footwork is just on point, being able to keep up with these receivers. So I think big time get for the Gators here to get this class of 2026 started. As you can see, just of course in the highlights, of course, you're going to pick out the good here. So not a lot of players are going to be giving up there, but certainly you like where lines up. You can see the confidence, being able to line up in just the one-on-one matchups that he's going to bring to the table. But certainly, I like his physicality. Certainly not afraid to get dirty. But this early on, you can see there's a lot of confidence in his coaching staff to be able to line him up in those situations, one-on-one, right in the face of the receiver. And he certainly has that confidence as well to go out there and play well. So good pickup there for the Gators to get this class of 2026 going. Even more so. So 2 commits right now for the class of 2026 right here with Jaelen Waters. So that was the eventful weekend on the recruiting trail that was for the Gators. And I think you probably would have asked some people, hey, Where the commit's going to come from this weekend probably wouldn't have been 26. It would have been the class of 2025. But I think those are just on the horizon. Hopefully the big names that we all have the decision dates coming. Hopefully Florida's the pick. But it's kind of where it stands right now. A lot of names on campus this past weekend. Florida's in good shape for a lot of those guys. Now just got to put some final touches on it. If they're making their decision soon, got to maybe hold off some other visits of guys are taking next weekend, taking the visits. Some guys to FSU, some guys to Miami. There's a lot of Florida State battles this go around. Florida Auburn battles this go around. Of course, Florida Miami as well. See how it all shakes out. We'll see how it all shakes out. But yeah, there we go. So we're trying to figure out what we'll do the rest of the week here on Gators Breakdown. And maybe I just talked about, I expect some commitments on the horizon. Hopefully we have some commitments to talk about before I go on vacation later this week. So you know how that turns out. If I'm on vacation, that's probably when all the commits will come. So I can't get to it. I can't talk to you about it. Not even going to try. Going to enjoy vacation. That's usually how it turns out. So hopefully it will once again. I'd rather have the commits than not have the commits. I don't care if I can talk about it or not. They'll be there when I get back. But that's how we'll do it. That's how we'll do it, of course. So we'll see. We'll see what the week holds. Leave on Thursday there. So we'll see what news comes out beforehand that I might can get into. But there we go. That'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.